She also taught a significant number of students who also were in the prizes in competition. She was also involved in a drama club with her older sister, Ina. Her father was very influential in her life, and as her history buff, would take the family to visit many of the martyrs' grave sites throughout Scotland. This continued in her later years as she continued this activity with us. She would often joke that with all the miles they traveled with their father to these sites and all the miles they walked, that they were martyrs as well. Working in the pits took its toll on her father, and he died when Mother was 13. His passing was in the early years of World War II, and his death required our grandmother to become the breadwinner and saw significant changes in Mother's life. Her first career job as an assistant nurse included the responsibility of disposing of amputated limbs of the wounded. When Mother was still in school, she received an Award of Excellence for top in her class, which included a novel called A Countess from Canada. Thus began her infatuation with Canada and dreams of canoeing, camping, portaging, open spaces, wilderness, rivers, and lakes. In 1942, in the middle of World War II, this infatuation with Canada was further strengthened when Mother and her sister Ina were returning from a trip to amusement arcade while on a break from her nursing duties at the Royal Glasgow Infirmary. As the story goes, and depending on who's telling it, while she was on the platform at the train station in Glasgow, Mom saw this tall, handsome, uniformed Canadian sailor who was on assignment to the British Navy and stationed nearby. She was quite taken by him. According to Mom, it turned out that the sailor was on a platform above her. He may have been handsome, but not quite as tall as she originally thought. The sailor insisted on escorting her and her sister back to the hospital. The following day, they met for a date. In 1942, they were married. Not long after, Dad was reassigned to his ship, the HMCS Ontario. A year later, the first of their children, Susan, was born. Not long after Susan's birth, Dad was headed to the Pacific Ocean and around the world and was gone for over a year. Mother settled into raising Susan, and not long after Susan's first birthday, they boarded a train for Liverpool to catch a ship, the SS Letitia, to Canada in a whole new life. In the meantime, Dad landed in Esquimalt, BC, and as the war had ended, was discharged from military service. Mother and Susan completed an arduous 2-week journey across the Atlantic Ocean, landing in Halifax. From there, they traveled by train to Windsor, Ontario, where they were met by Dad, who was accompanied by a large welcoming party of Dad's family and friends. In her second week of Canadian life, Mother, along with her mother-in-law, heard a loud roar and went outside to see a large funnel cloud and survived a tornado that took the lives of 10 persons. Canada was quite a cultural shock. However, Mom and Dad and family started their new life. Dad was a tool and die maker by trade, and Mother settled into running the household. They started out in a small community near Windsor called Ojibwe. During that time, the family grew to include Peter, Nick, and Mary. The family moved to Windsor, and while there, growing again with the addition of Roberta and Eric. In 1958, Dad took a job with the Outboard Marine Corporation, and the family relocated to Peterborough. A year later, the family moved to the homestead, the bustling community of Fowler's Corners. Mom has lived there ever since. During that time, the family expanded again with the additions of Vicki and Paul. The property has certainly changed since the early days of the Lasch occupation, including a house rebuilding thanks to their son Peter and the support of family and friends. After the original homestead was destroyed by fire in 2003. Dad worked steady midnights with Mother ruling the roost. Mom and Dad were all about family through and through, and it was very seldom that Mom and Dad would go anywhere without all the kids in tow. Mother's early dreams and strong interest in Canada came to be with her little piece of Canada on Chemung Lake. With Dad, her devoted partner, her desire for canoeing, camping, portaging, open spaces, wilderness, rivers, and lakes became a mainstay in her life. In addition, and for many years, most summer weekends, as well as camping, were spent traveling to parades, Highland games, and watching their children Highland dance, play drums, and play bagpipes. As well, Mom and Dad very seldom missed any event if their children were involved, including hockey and lacrosse. This support continued with her 20 grandchildren and her 22 great-grandchildren, whom she loved dearly. I truly believe Mom loved and supported all of her family equally, encouraging all to be the best they could, and at the same time, our strongest critic. I recall a trip to the East Coast in the mid-60s, when Mom woke us up around 6 o'clock in the morning. The car was packed to the brim, and Mom drove us to pick up Dad from work, who was getting off his midnight shift to start their annual vacation, so we could get an early start. We spent over a night in a gas station in Quebec waiting for it to open, and we're in Nova Scotia within 2 days. Mother was a force to be reckoned with and a true matriarch. As well as a respected Highland dance instructor, she taught Sunday school, she was a CGIT leader, a Brownie and Girl Guide leader, UCW member, hospice volunteer, and never afraid to accept a challenge. As her children grew up, she also drove school bus and for a time worked at Regal Stationery. Mother was never far from her knitting needles, winning prizes every year from the Lindsay X with her knitting. In fact, there wasn't a craft she wouldn't attempt. Never one to refuse a challenge, she always kept her yard in good repair, including tending her gardens, mowing the acres of lawn in the summer, and shoveling driveway in the winter. In fact, in her 80s, she was still determined to carry out some of these responsibilities, and more than once, I would have to encourage her to put the shovel down and I would finish the job. Mom loved to swim, but she would go swimming pretty well every day throughout the summer. After her stroke, in fact only months before her passing, I would tune her fiddle for her and she would entertain me. Mother had a number of one-liners. A few of her favorites, the one that always stood out when we were young and we had friends visiting and we were in the house and started getting on her nerves, her go-to line was, "Away with you and bend the hoose." My friends would question if she was speaking English. If we did something stupid or silly, she'd tell us, "It's a daft dog that bites itself." Mom and Dad were both strong supporters of the working man, and her favorite poet, of course, was Robbie Burns. One of his quotes that was never far from her thoughts was, "Oh, what a gift that God could give us to see ourselves as others see us." I'm sure that those of you who knew Mother have your own stories of her determination, her wonderful character, and her resolve. She lived a long and productive life and will be missed by all. I've also been asked on behalf of her older sister's daughter, Lorna, who's in Scotland right now. It can't be in attendance, but she asked me to say a few words on her behalf. Whether it was having weekly tea, going for a paddle in the canoe, or strolling down to the point to sit and look for the loons on the lake, I spent a great deal of time with Aunt Sue. She shared stories of her time in Scotland and time spent there with my mother, which was nice since I didn't know her well. She laughed at the multiple pictures I had of Will Willie's statues I showed her from my trip to Scotland a few years ago. She gave me books to read on Scotland's history and often said to her that I was surprised that there were any Scottish people left the way the clans like to battle one another. And if not one another, they were fighting the English. She was a talented knitter, making numerous pipers and some for Robbie Burns nights, which I had hosted. She often asked me if I had finished mine. She would have 5 or 6, and I still haven't got mine completed. I think she took sympathy on me and gave me a set of bagpipes she had knitted, hoping that maybe that would spur me on to finish mine. Unfortunately, it still sits incomplete. There are many, many tales to tell of a woman that spent so many years on this earth but I would just like to say that I'm very glad that I got to spend the time listening to her. She had a terrific memory. I will miss her and her cups of tea and chat, and that was from Lorna.